tried to submit a video to Guinness Book of World Record, but we haven't got it submitted yet.
All right, well, I'm here with Mike Adamson, who is a avid Bowie knife collector. And he has put together, quite honestly, a very nice display here of Bowie knives, including a big giant 7-foot, 8 3/4 inch Bowie knife that he has stamped Adamson and Reindels, Treasure Valley, Idaho. Here's Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, come to the Oregon Knife Show.
And so tell us about it. What do you got here?
Well, most of these are my collection here. A friend of mine, he donated his Bowies, and that's mostly his collection. And we spread our stuff in the middle to try to create a comprehensive display of Bowie knives that you can find anywhere around the world. Sheffield, German, American. Factory knives, handmade knives, old rustic pieces, brand new shiny ones.
Yeah, tell me about this little brass-backed stag here.
The brass-backed stag. It's "Don't Tread on Me." Some of the famous things that you ever find in the Civil War Bowie knives are etches that gave patriotism and like the Union and so forth. And so the brass back was supposedly for stopping the opponent's blade during a knife fight, but there's never been a documented case where they found that. However, when you put a brass back on a knife, it just seems to increase its coolness, whatever, the cool factor. So. But and then the crown stag, the end of the antler attached to the skull.
What's the stamp here?
Colt. Colt Arms Manufacturing.
Colt since 1836,
which was the year of the Alamo.
And where'd you come across that knife?
That's a knife that you can get on the internet for fairly under $100 in a lot of cases. So
even with that stamp, don't tread on me.
With the same knife. And also I've seen it in Damascus, without the stamp, of course, in Damascus for a few dollars more. So Bowie knives aren't just for the rich. You can have a giant Bowie knife like this for very little.
I see you got a Wade Butcher etched knife.
Etched Bowie, yeah. You see the etching there.
It says "Defender of what's right."
Another patriotic saying that was popular during the Civil War.
And it looks like it's fairly newer model.
Yeah, that's made after the Civil War, almost right into the turn of the century, 1900, 1930s, something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely 1900s.
It's probably more like in the 50s or 60s because of that chromy, shiny blade.
If
that was a Civil War etched version, that would be several $1,000s instead of several $100s.
Exactly. And we got a coffin-handled Spanish notch here.
The Spanish notch was something you saw in early Mediterranean daggers that transferred over to Bowie knife makers, and that was real popular during the Civil War.
Now, you know, I've read a lot.
For catching the other guy's blade. Again, never documented.
I've heard that, and you know what my 2 cents is on it? Spanish notches were made for barbed wire.
Right, and I've seen guys say that they've stripped rope through them too.
That's an interesting fact.
Well, that's what the Mediterranean dagger notch was supposed to be for, but when it transferred to the Bowie knife, that kind of fell by the wayside, and the myth about catching the other guy's blade in that notch continued on. Right.
And we got
another Colt D-guard Bowie, reminiscent of the knives that the Southern boys would take during the war. The D-guard was very popular in the South. And then you could get Sheffield knives that went around the Cape and then sold in San Francisco for 3 times their value to guys headed to the gold field. Etched California knife. And then this is an early American style, guardless coffin handle Bowie. Like a Peter Rose New York knife like this would be a $40,000 knife. A copy like this, more like $400.
Wow.
And then a small, fancy knife with abalone, ivory, or pearl was called a gambler's Bowie, something he could hide in his sleeve, in his vest pocket, and use while still sitting at the poker table.
Here we've got a Linder Eagle Head Bowie. Now, Linder made a lot of Bowies in the early 1800s?
Well, I don't know if it's 1800s, but after Germany became a major player in the cutlery industry, they would do all kinds of really fancy work. There's another Linder, the lion head Bowie, there next to it. And then in the middle, you have your IXL recreation. Again, a real one of those, $25,000.
Yeah,
a copy,
Horsehead, yeah.
Copy
Definitely.
more like $500-700.
Yeah.
And again, with patriotic sayings for the Civil War, popular during the Civil War.
Yeah.
Sometimes the IXL and other companies would work both sides of the street. They would sell the same knife in New York that says "Death to Traitors," and they would take the same knife and etch it "Death to Abolitionists" and sell it in the South. So those guys were working both sides of the street during the Civil War.
Well, that is a fantastic little tidbit there that I really didn't know, which is good to hear. That's great.
They didn't care. They didn't know who was going to win, so they supplied knives to both sides.
They sure did, didn't they? Yeah.
Most of the finest, most valuable knives in all Bowie collections were made in Sheffield during the 1850s and 60s.
That's absolutely right.
The only exception to that would be San Francisco knives made before that during the gold rush.
Yeah. Well, gee, thanks, Mike.
No problem. So if anybody has a scabbard for this knife, please contact us.
Yeah.
For a right-hander.
Yeah. That is awesome. Thank you, Mike.